Hi, welcome back. This is topic 28, infectious disease for Bio 116. If you don't have me normally, I'm Dr. Beal. If you do have me normally, I am still Dr. Beal, and I'm going to do a little segment on Lyme disease and malaria. These are arthropod vectored pathogens. Lyme disease, which is something that may affect you in New Jersey. Lyme disease is a bacteria that's vectored by the bite of a tick. Malaria is a eukaryotic single-celled organism that is vectored by the bite of a mosquito. And if you don't have me, then you may not know I'm an entomologist. I'm extremely interested in insects and how insects interact with people. So I've picked two diseases that I think are important to you and certainly are important that you know about. And it gives me a little chance to talk about something I'm excited about. So I'm going to start with Lyme disease. Lyme disease, I think, is something that you have actually heard about. Lyme disease is why you check yourself for ticks. I mean, except besides the feeling of you don't want a tick eating you, but it's why you check yourself for ticks when you go hiking all over New Jersey or Pennsylvania or in Connecticut. Lyme disease is spread by the bite of a tick. The pathogen, the bacteria, is Borrelia burgdorferi. That is a picture down here. It is a spirochete. So it's a type of bacteria that has the swirling shape like a corkscrew. And this bacteria was first discovered in Lyme, Connecticut. That's why it's called Lyme disease. Now, it was discovered sort of in the 1900s, and as children started to develop an inordinate number of child rheumatoid arthritis symptoms all over this little town in Connecticut. And it was way outside of the normal numbers that you would expect for such a tiny area. So people started looking for another cause than the autoimmune disease that is normally rheumatoid arthritis. And what they found is these children had a really high level of these spirochetes in their blood. Now, if they look back in the historical records, we find evidence of reports of rheumatoid arthritis back from the earliest possible records. And then there are oral stories, even from probably the 1300s and before, of the tribes in the region that actually had incidences of really high rheumatoid arthritis. That's one of the symptoms of Lyme's disease. So we think this disease has been around a long time. It's normally spread within a population of deer and mice. It's vectored by ticks. So vectored means that the tick spreads the disease as a normal part of its life cycle. As the tick feeds on a host, it also passes this bacteria into the host blood. These are gram-negative bacteria. I'm going to zoom in and show you a little bit about their life cycle, but it means that they're a little bit difficult for us to treat. If you have been bitten by a tick, you absolutely want to look out for symptoms, but you probably want to save the tick and go to your doctor as well. This is some ticks here, and I've put the page number. There's a very brief paragraph in your textbook. I've also included the link for the CDC website for this. I'll put this in the link at the bottom of the video as well. I think it's a pretty comprehensive view of Lyme. This is a dime, and this nymph and female are the size of the tick that's going to bite you and give you Lyme. So the larval tick it bites, but it won't be able to spread Lyme to you. The nymph is most likely to be able to spread it to you. And for reference, this nymph is slightly smaller than the little seeds on the outside of a strawberry. So very difficult to find. You may absolutely never know that it's been crawling on you, let alone having bit you, unless you're actually looking very carefully for it. So this is its life cycle. I've drawn it very simple here. They are normally found biting deer and mice. We are not the preferred host of this tick. This tick bites people opportunistically. So ticks are they're not very smart. They don't spend a lot of time hunting. A tick climbs to the top of the highest piece of grass it can find, and it does this. And as it does this, it just waits for something to bump into it. And if anything moving and warm bumps into its extended legs, it grabs on and it climbs up as high into the moistest place possible, and then it starts to feed. Now, normally that is something like a mouse for a larval tick. And this little larval tick bites the mouse, or maybe a robin or some kind of bird. It bites that animal, and then it starts to feed. It injects its mouth parts. It starts to drink blood. It's going to use this to go through its molts. It's going to use this for energy. But as it drinks blood from the mouse already has a level of those spirochetes, a level of Lyme in its blood. And these white-footed mice kind of constantly maintain this bacteria in their blood. So as this larvae feeds and it lives its life cycle, it grows up, it molts, and it grows up into a nymph. This nymph climbs to the top of a branch, and now it has the bacteria inside of its gut, and it waves its front legs around, and it grabs onto preferentially a white-tailed deer, which is our local deer, but often onto a human. And when you're walking around and it bites you, it climbs up as high as it can to the warmest, moistest plates. It's probably going to climb up into your crotch. It's going to hide behind your ears. They're going to get in your armpits, places where you may not be able to find them very easily. And then it bites, and they'll feed for 24 to 48 hours, injecting their mouth parts, slurping out your blood, but they're sloppy feeders. So the bacteria also, as they slurp and spill their saliva in you, the bacteria ends up getting into your blood, and the spirochete breeds inside of you. If it fed on a deer, it's going to grow up. Maybe if it fed on you and you didn't notice it, it's going to grow up and go through its final adult molt. An adult female will also bite and feed. You also, in the fall, have the chance of encountering a female tick who is feeding so that she can make eggs, latching onto you and passing the disease to you. Now, I want to add in one tiny thing. I need to tell you how to get rid of a tick. When you're walking in the woods in New Jersey, you should put your socks up over your knee, not over your knees, put your socks up over your pants, wear white socks, and then check yourself. Make sure you're not covered in ticks when you get home. When I go out in the woods to do hiking or enjoy the woods, I always check myself when I get home. I take a shower. I put conditioner in my hair so that I can feel if something is crawling on me. It's important to do that here. I don't want to discourage you. I want you, in fact, to go outside and enjoy the world, but you should be aware that there are ticks that want to eat you. If you do find a tick, there's all kinds of folk remedies for getting rid of it. I've been told you should set them on fire, you should cover them with Vaseline so they suffocate. All that's going to do is cause them to throw up inside of you. So if you set them on fire or if you suffocate them with Vaseline, they're going to spit up the contents of their entire guts in you before they die. You are maximizing your exposure to the bacteria. What you need to do is take a pair of forceps, and when you see a tick, grab it by the back of the head, the part that's just sticking out. The mouth parts are going to be embedded inside of you. Grab it by the back of the head and pull straight out. You want to get the tick, the mouth parts, and you want to squeeze so it can't barf inside of you and pass more pathogen inside of you. I'm going to recommend that if you think you've been exposed to Lyme, if you're not sure you can identify this tick, save it, bring it to me, bring it to your doctor. I can tell you, your doctor can maybe tell you if this is the type of tick that can transmit Lyme's, and then they can choose what to do from there. It can be treated with antibiotics. We tend to treat it prophylactically. That means that the doctor may give you antibiotics when you go to the doctor and say, I've been infected by a tick. And she's going to say, oh, we don't know if you have Lyme's or not, but here's an antibiotic. And I know we've told you that that's not a good idea. But in this case, we want to knock it down before the population of the bacteria starts to overwhelm your body. This is the most common tick-borne disease in the United States. I want you to look at this map. This is a map of reported cases of Lyme disease. Here is Rutgers, right there, in the bluest part of the blue of this map. The doctor's going to give you a prophylactic antibiotic because it's very likely if you've been bitten and you've found a tick that's been feeding on you for a day, it's likely that you've actually been exposed and they want to get you before you get sick. Your best way to not get Lyme's is prevention. Still go outside, still enjoy the woods, but look, it takes a little while for them to feed on you. So check your body. Take a shower when you get home. Change your clothes if you've been outside hiking in the woods, and make sure that those ticks aren't climbing on you. Malaria is a parasite. It's a Plasmodium species parasite. And so what is a parasite? Since we haven't really defined that, parasites are something that lives in or on another organism. We generally talk about them as being things like worms. You know, like, oh, I've got a parasite. I've got tapeworms. Or you might have a roommate that's a parasite. They just get all your food. They take all your stuff, but they don't actually give anything back. When we define this in the class, a parasite is going to be something like an external parasite, like a tick or a flea, an internal parasite, like a hookworm or a liver fluke. It reproduces faster than the host, so it has a higher reproduction than the host. Your tapeworm makes more babies than you do, or your tick does. And it has a positive-negative interaction. The parasite benefits, the host is negatively impacted. But unlike a predator, a parasite generally does not kill the host. Parasites live in you and they live off of you, and they'd like you to live a really long time because they're using you for nutrients and a place to hide. Malaria is a parasite. It's in the genus Plasmodium. There are 4 common malarias that affect people. The most worrisome is Plasmodium falciparum. There's also Plasmodium vivax, and I'll talk about a couple different varieties of them. They are all vectored by mosquitoes and a specific genus of mosquitoes called Anopheline mosquitoes. There's a picture of a mosquito feeding on a person. These mosquitoes are very good at hunting people. They often bite you and you're not aware that you've been bit. These are not the mosquitoes where you feel a sharp pain when they bite. An Anopheline mosquito, when she bites you, is very often something you don't notice. You may not get a rash. You may not have a reaction from her. They have evolved to eat people in many cases, and so we don't notice them as well. They are also super sloppy eaters. So when an Anopheline mosquito bites you, not only do they drink your blood, but every time they take a sip, they spit back inside of you. Like when you were little and you had the straw and you slurped up and then spit back all the liquid in your mouth into the soda can. That's exactly how Anopheline mosquitoes feed. So they're incredibly good at vectoring, incredibly good at passing diseases from their gut into you. And there are a myriad, a lot of different kinds of mosquito vectored diseases and parasites, because malarial mosquitoes and Anopheline mosquitoes particularly are really, really bad at eating cleanly. They're really messy eaters. Now, malaria is endemic to the U.S. Endemic means it is found naturally here, but it's been eradicated since the 1950s. We have cases every year in the U.S. of malaria. We have Anopheline mosquitoes, but we were very successful in the 1950s using the pesticide DDT to knock it down. Now, right now, and I picked the data from 2015. I'll show you a little bit later data in a couple minutes. We, right now, worldwide, estimate that there's about 200, a little bit more than 200 million clinical episodes of malaria and nearly 500,000 deaths every year, primarily caused by one species of Plasmodium. And I've given you the little tree here. You remember this back from the very beginning of class. This is the eukaryotic tree. Plasmodium is in the SAR clade. It is an apicomplexan, so it's in the alveolates. Yes, it stems from this secondary endosymbiosis of a red algae, but they are parasites now. They do not photosynthesize. Plasmodium makes its living eating you. I've put up the whole life cycle. I'm not going to click through it slowly so you can look at it as I talk. To give you some references here, this is on this side is in the mosquito. Malaria goes through part of its life cycle in a mosquito. And this is inside of a human. malaria goes through another part of its life cycle in a human. Now, this is the most complicated life cycle we're going to show you all semester. This is what you've been preparing for when you've been doing plant life cycles and fungal life cycles and animal life cycles, because we're going to put a bunch of it together. And this is Plasmodium falciparum. This is a specific species that is pretty insidious in causing disease, because this particular species of malaria spends part of its life cycle hiding inside the liver, and it's really difficult for us to target it. It can hide for a long time, and then all of a sudden you develop new symptoms of malaria. We thought you didn't have it anymore, but it's been hiding in your liver all along. So I'm going to give you the most complicated version and the most dangerous version of the malaria parasite here. So I'm going to start. There is, I don't know how well, you guys have to zoom in with your glasses here. There's a mosquito feeding on this person's arm. This mosquito injects her mouth parts, and it's always going to be a female mosquito. She's doing this so that she can make eggs. She injects her mouth part, and she feeds very sloppily. She spits, she swallows the blood, she spits a little bit of the sporozoites. These mosquito-borne malaria parasites, and she spits them into your blood. Sporozoites are haploid. They swim through your blood and they go to your liver and they infect your liver and they wait. They go through mitosis. They're eukaryotes. They divide. They reproduce. And then maybe you're feeling bad. Maybe your immune system's already suppressed. And then they leave your liver and they swim through your blood and they infect your red blood cells. The sporozoites infect your liver and wait. They go through a very long mitosis waiting period. And when they emerge from your liver cell, they look different, but they are still haploid. They're called merozoites, and they swim from your liver in your blood, and they actually penetrate. Here's a picture of one penetrating a red blood cell. It has this apical complex, like all apical complexins, and this apical complex allows it a very effective way of penetrating your nice, fat, round red blood cells and getting inside. As it gets inside, they divide. They start affecting your ability to transport oxygen. You start to develop a really high fever. And as your fever spikes, these merozoites go through mitosis and they produce gametocytes. These gametocytes are haploid. They travel in your blood. And they are what, when the next mosquito feeds on you, she takes in your blood and slurps in some gametocytes, and she flies off. Inside her, as she's flying around, the gametocytes go through fertilization, haploid and haploid to diploid, and they form a diploid zygote that goes through meiosis and forms sporozoites again. This mosquito then flies around. She's got your new sporozoites that spent part of their life cycle in you, and she bites somebody else in your family. She bites your neighbor. And now you and your neighbor and the people in your family have malaria, all of which is going through its really complicated life cycle. Depending on what type of malaria you're infected with, this life cycle can take years. It can take days. It can go through here once, and I can target it really well because it doesn't spend time in the liver. Or falciparum malaria will hide in the liver for a long time and cause you a lot of long-term damage. Malaria is more than one parasite. It's an entire genus of parasites. And each one of those parasites has a slightly different part of its life cycle where it's easier or harder for us to address that particular pathogen. Which leads us to treatment. So although we have understood malaria for quite a long period of time, it's very difficult for us to knock down. It's very difficult for us to eradicate malaria because of its really complex life cycle and because of other social and economic issues that surround areas where malaria is endemic. Now, in the 1950s, we had a very successful campaign against malaria using the pesticide DDT. DDT was sprayed everywhere across the United States, across sub-Saharan Africa, across India, across other parts of Asia, and we knocked down the mosquito population. It's a pesticide that kills insects. We knocked down the mosquito population substantially, and the level of malaria in the population of humans also went way down. The problem is DDT is incredibly dangerous. Initially, it was advertised as being something you could spray all over your own body. It was totally fine. And it is, maybe. But it causes massive ecological damage. It bioaccumulates. It increases as we go up the food chain or the food web. It causes damage over generations where children that are born because their parents were exposed to DDT have problems because of that previous exposure. It persists in the environment. And you can look at this now. DDT converts really rapidly into DDE. And that DDE is something that you have in your blood. I could measure it in you, even though you and I have never been alive when DDT was sprayed all over the country. You still have that you've gotten from just the environment, from your food and the things around you. You have measurable levels of a compound that derives from DDT in your blood. That's worrisome. And so we stopped using DDT, and mosquito populations and bedbug populations rebounded across the world. Other pesticides have had some effect, enough to keep it knocked down, but not enough to stop the spread of malaria. There are economic and social issues that also interfere with us eradicating malaria around the world. Right now, the best treatment is prevention. Don't get bit. And so a lot of organizations, a lot of education efforts stem around avoiding getting in contact with the mosquitoes. This is a mosquito net. It goes over your bed. It prevents the mosquitoes from biting you. It's embedded with some pesticides so that they can't get through it. Pesticide-embedded clothing, not allowing the mosquitoes to breed in your yard are your best ways to cut down on mosquito-vectored diseases in general. We have had even better success in the last couple of years, and it was just World Malaria Day. World Malaria Day is on April 25th. World Malaria Day this year was celebrating the fact that we are past the initial trials, and we're in our first really big trial of an effective malarial vaccine. So this year, the first successful vaccine is being tested on a really wide-ranging basis in 3 sub-Saharan African countries. It's been introduced as a series of shots. So there's an initial shot and a series of boosters that are given to young children. Those young children have shown a much more increased defense against the malarial parasite. They're much less likely to get malaria. Within the last 2 decades, malarial deaths have dropped by nearly half, 40%. A lot of that has to do with vaccine trials. Some of that has to do with better education and more access to nets. We are slowly winning this battle against this parasite that lives almost everywhere that it is warm in the entire world. This vaccine, I've put its name, it's RTSS, we're very hopeful that it's working. If it's successful in the first couple years, the first part of this trial was 2019, but by 2025, this will be widely distributed. And maybe by the time we're all little old people, malaria will be something that we talked about like smallpox, something that happened to our ancestors, but maybe not to us. A side note. This always ends with everyone asking me, I don't want any of those things. I don't want a parasite. How do you avoid getting it? The same way you avoid many things. Wash your hands, particularly after you use the toilet, after you're in the garden, after you've been petting some strange cat that you saw on the street. Petting strange cats digging around in the garden, and using the toilet are great ways to spread parasites. So wash your hands. And now we've had every song possible about how to properly wash your hands. Get under your fingernails, get between your fingers, and get the backs of your hands, which most people miss. Don't kiss your dog. Don't kiss your cat. Don't kiss animals who eat things outside and then come in and spread them to you. Your dog and cat get worming medicine regularly. You do not. And if you want to avoid things like tapeworms or any kind of worms, you definitely shouldn't be kissing animals. Don't let them kiss your face. When you travel, even here in the United States, use things like mosquito nets. Mosquitoes, ticks spread a lot of diseases because they are blood-feeding parasites. Your best bet is to avoid contact with them. Check yourself when you come back from the woods. Check yourself and make sure you're not covered in parasites that are external and feeding on you. And then avoid creating homes for them. Dump out containers of water. The pans underneath your plants should be not full of water and creating habitats for the mosquitoes. If you're going to walk through high grasses, make sure that you check moist parts of your body, like your armpit or your crotch, and make sure you're not carrying your ticks home with you. I know it seems like an extra level of things to do, but you make it a habit and you don't have to worry about the parasites eating you. With that, don't do that. That's your number one advantage in avoiding getting a parasite. Don't kiss your dog or your cat. And that's the end of my little summary of parasites that affect you that are vectored by arthropods. Lyme disease is endemic to New Jersey. This is something you're going to encounter whether you want to or not in your everyday life. Malaria, very likely something you will encounter and something you definitely need to know about. Again, come to my office hours, come to my reviews, your TAs, Dr. Stern Carnell's reviews. Let's talk about this. I do want you to be able to do the life cycles. I'd like you to be able to put this all together. I'd like to be able to ask you an exam question that says something like, is malaria more related to a fungus or a bacteria? And have you be able to kind of guess where malaria fits on the tree of life and how things fit together. So be prepared to kind of tie all the course material together and answer questions about Lyme disease and malaria. I will then send you on to Dr. Stern Carnell for his lecture on COVID-19 and viruses, and I'll see you back in the finale. All right. Bye-bye.